Ever wondered why naval battles in movies look so heroic and clean? Think again. In the Age of Sail, the deadliest weapon wasn't a cannonball, it was a splinter. Yep, a jagged piece of wood could kill more sailors than enemy fire, tearing through flesh in ways Hollywood never shows. Let's talk about this brutal truth and two other shocking realities of naval warfare that'll change how you see these fights forever. Stick around as we uncover the gruesome facts, historical chaos, and personal stories that bring the real battle to life. What if the deadliest thing at sea during a naval battle wasn't a cannonball, but just a regular piece of wood? Sounds crazy, right? Let's talk about splinters and why they took out more sailors than you'd ever guess. You might think a big iron ball smashing through a ship would be the worst threat, but the real terror came from something much simpler. Stick with me, because this is the kind of thing movies never show, and it'll blow your mind how deadly a ship itself could be. Picture a naval battle in full swing. Cannons are roaring, ships are clashing, and you're picturing sailors getting knocked out by cannonballs, aren't you? That's what we all assume. But here's the twist. Those cannonballs weren't usually the biggest killer. When they slammed into a wooden ship, sure, they did damage, but the real horror was what came next. The ship's own timbers shattered into sharp, nasty splinters that flew everywhere. These jagged bits of oak turned the deck into a danger zone, way worse than just the impact of the shot. You weren't just fighting the enemy, you were fighting your own vessel. Now, don't think of these as the tiny slivers you get from a rough board. Nah, we're talking serious business. When a cannonball hit, it sent chunks of wood, some as big as your forearm, blasting through the air at speeds that could rip right through flesh. Imagine knives just shooting out in every direction with no warning. 1 second you're loading a gun, the next you've got a piece of your ship stabbing into you. Sailors didn't stand a chance against something so random and fast. That's the kind of terror that kept men awake at night, knowing even a near miss could end them. Think of it like a grenade going off in a lumberyard. Everything around you turns into a weapon. Sailors had to dodge enemy fire, sure, but they also had to pray their own ship didn't betray them. A single hit on the hull could send wooden shards flying, piercing through uniforms, skin, anything in the way. You're basically standing in a death trap made of oak, hoping luck is on your side. And guess what? Luck usually wasn't. The very thing protecting you from the sea was also ready to take you out without a second thought. Historical data backs this up in a big way. If you look at old medical logs from naval battles, especially from the 1700s and 1800s, splinters show up as the top cause of injuries. More sailors went down from these wooden spikes than from direct cannon hits. The problem was, once you got hit, good luck getting patched up. Surgeons on ships had basic tools at best. Think rusty blades and no painkillers. A deep splinter wound, that was often a death sentence. Infection set in fast, or you just bled out before anyone could even try to help. Just imagine a young sailor, maybe only 18 years old, standing on deck when a cannonball strikes nearby. A splinter as long as your arm catches him in the side. He's down, bleeding everywhere, with no one free to drag him below deck. The battle's still raging, and he's just one of many. There's no fancy rescue scene like in the movies. That was the grim reality for thousands of men back then. It wasn't glamorous, it was a nightmare playing out on a rocking ship in the middle of nowhere. Sources from the Napoleonic Wars paint an even darker picture. After a fight, ship decks were littered with wood shards, each one a potential killer waiting for the next explosion. Captains wrote about how they'd lose men not to enemy guns, but to these flying pieces of debris. One report described a deck looking like it had been through a shredder, with sailors stepping over broken timber that had already claimed lives. Every battle left a mess that just kept on killing, long after the cannons stopped firing. You wouldn't believe how often these injuries turned the tide of a fight. A single cannon shot could disable half a crew without even sinking the ship. Men were too hurt to man the guns or pull the ropes, leaving their vessel a sitting duck. Here's the kicker. Splinters were the top killer in naval battles, outdoing cannonballs by a wide margin. That's the brutal truth Hollywood skips over while showing neat little explosions. Now, if splinters were bad, wait until you hear how impossible it was to even give orders in the middle of all this mess. Let's move to that next. Ever tried yelling over a thunderstorm? Now imagine doing that in a battle with cannons blasting every few seconds. Let's talk about how communication broke down completely at sea during naval fights in the Age of Sail. After seeing how deadly splinters could be, you might think that was the worst of it. But trust me, trying to get a single order across in the middle of all that noise and chaos was a whole different kind of nightmare. Stick with me, because this is going to show you just how messy these battles really got. You've probably watched movies where a captain stands tall on deck, barking orders left and right, and the crew jumps to action like clockwork. It looks so slick, doesn't it? Everyone knows exactly what to do, and the plan comes together perfectly. Well, sorry to burst that bubble, but in real life, once the shooting started, no one could hear a thing. The roar of cannons was deafening, like standing next to a jet engine taking off. Add in the crash of waves, the screams of injured men and the crack of breaking wood, and you've got a scene where shouting an order was as useful as whispering in a rock concert. Forget about hearing anything. Sailors were basically on their own as soon as the first shot rang out. Now, since yelling didn't work, ships back then had other ways to pass messages. They relied on flags raised high on the masts or lanterns lit up at night to signal between vessels. Sounds clever, right? But here's the catch. Those methods were pretty much useless half the time. Thick smoke from gunpowder blanketed the battlefield, hiding flags from view. If that wasn't bad enough, distance between ships made it hard to spot tiny signals, and don't even get me started on panic. When men are fighting for their lives, they're not exactly squinting through the haze to read a flag code. Half the time, signals got missed or misread, leaving everyone guessing what the plan even was. Think of it like trying to text someone during a blackout with no service. You're tapping away, hoping the message gets through, but it's a shot in the dark. On a ship, orders often got lost in the chaos, or worse, they got scrambled. A flag meant to say, turn left, might look like, full speed ahead to a stressed out lookout. And sometimes, captains just straight up ignored signals if they thought they knew better. So, you've got a fleet where no one's on the same page, each ship doing its own thing while hoping it doesn't crash into an ally. That's not strategy. That's just blind luck, deciding who wins. Historical accounts from huge battles, like Trafalgar, paint a clear picture of this mess. During that famous fight in 1805, even Admiral Nelson's genius plans hit snags because flag signals failed under pressure. Smoke and confusion meant ships couldn't see the commands, so they had to act on their own with no idea if they were helping or hurting the bigger strategy. Picture an entire fleet scattered across the waves, sails flapping in different directions, each captain making wild guesses about what to do next. That's not the tidy formation you see in paintings. It's how real battles unfolded, with no one in sync. Just imagine being one of those captains, peering through the smoke, unable to get a clear message from the flagship. You've got enemy ships closing in, your crew waiting for direction, and you're stuck making split-second calls with zero input from above. Maybe you turn to fight, maybe you run, but either way, you're rolling the dice. That's the kind of pressure that turned seasoned sailors' hair gray overnight. It wasn't a game of chess on the water. It was a frantic scramble, where half the moves were based on gut feelings rather than solid orders. Research from other conflicts, like the War of 1812, shows this wasn't a one-time problem. British and American ships often fought blind, sticking to preset plans that fell apart within minutes of the first cannon blast. Once the action heated up, it was every ship for itself. You wouldn't believe how often this chaos flipped the outcome of a fight. A single missed signal could send a fleet into disorder, dooming them before the enemy even fired a decisive shot. One wrong move, and your side was done for. The real challenge here was that command structures crumbled under fire. Every battle turned into a desperate free-for-all, with no neat chain of command to save the day. Movies never show that mess, do they? They skip right over the part where no one knew what was going on. Speaking of messes, let's shift to another ugly truth. Boarding actions weren't heroic duels like you've seen on screen. They were pure, brutal chaos. Stick around for that story. Think boarding a ship was all swashbuckling and glory? Think again. Let's talk about the desperate, bloody reality of fighting deck to deck in naval battles during the Age of Sail. We've already seen how splinters could kill without warning and how communication fell apart under fire. But now, picture getting so close to an enemy ship that your only choice is to jump over and fight hand to hand. This isn't the neat, heroic stuff you've seen on screen. It's a whole other level of chaos, and I'm going to walk you through just how ugly it got. You've probably watched movies where boarding looks like a daring adventure. There's always some brave pirate swinging across on a rope, sword in hand, ready for a tidy little duel. Everyone's got perfect footwork, and it's all over in a few stylish moves. Yeah, right. In real life, boarding was nothing like that. It was a last-ditch gamble when ships got locked together, too close to pull away. Maybe the wind died, or damage left both vessels stuck, sails useless. At that point, it wasn't about flair or strategy. It was about climbing over to the other side and hoping you made it out alive. Most times, it was a desperate move, not a bold choice. Once sailors crossed over, forget about any kind of orderly fight. It wasn't a duel with polite rules. It was a flat-out brawl, messy and mean. Men grabbed whatever they could, knives, clubs, even their bare hands, if that's all they had. You're not fencing for points. You're swinging to survive in a packed crush of bodies. Imagine dozens of guys crammed on a slippery deck, everyone shoving and slashing, No space to step back or think. It's pure chaos, with every second a battle to keep standing. That's not the fancy footwork of a movie star. That's just raw, ugly fighting to not get killed. Picture yourself stepping onto an enemy deck in the middle of that mess. Your boots hit the wood, but it's slick with blood, and you're sliding before you even get a grip. You can't tell who's on your side and who's not. Everyone's yelling, uniforms are torn, and faces are just blurs of sweat and fear. Think of it as the Age of Sail version of a street fight, except way deadlier. One wrong move, and a rusty blade catches you in the gut. Or maybe a club smashes down before you can duck. There's no time to play hero. You're just trying to breathe through the next minute, while everything around you falls apart. Historical records from single-ship actions in the Napoleonic era show just how brutal this got. Boarding fights often ended with one side giving up, not because they lost some grand battle, but just to stop the carnage. Both crews would be so cut up, so worn out, that surrender was the only way to stop more dying. It wasn't about pride or glory at that point. It was about not watching everyone bleed out on a deck that looked more like a butcher's floor than a ship. Those old logs don't talk about daring victories. They talk about men who just wanted the nightmare over, no matter who claimed the prize. Think about a sailor's account from the Battle of Santiago. He wrote about fighting so close to the enemy that you could smell their sweat mixing with gunpowder in the air. That's not just physical. It's raw fear sinking into your bones. You're not trading clever jabs or cool one-liners like in films. You're staring into someone's eyes, inches away, knowing one of you isn't walking away from this. That kind of closeness, that kind of stakes, sticks with a person. It's not something you shake off with a grin. It's the stuff that haunts you if you're lucky enough to survive. Sources from back then make it clear. Boarding wasn't just risky. It was a meat grinder. Crews knew going in that they might not come back, even if they won the ship as a prize. Every man understood the odds. You might capture the vessel, but at what cost? Half your mates could be gone, or you might not make it yourself. You wouldn't believe how often these fights turned into pure survival mode. Winning didn't mean a big cheer or a pat on the back. It meant living another day. Nothing more, nothing less. The downside is that boarding was chaotic slaughter, not heroism. Hollywood skips the part where most sailors just wanted it to end, whatever the cost. They don't show the broken bodies, or the guys who gave up just to stop the killing. Now that we've seen the violence up close, let's pull back to a personal story that ties all this horror to one man's final words. Stay with me. What does all this brutality mean for the people caught up in it? Let's talk about a captain's final letter to his wife, written on the eve of a battle. We've seen how Splinters could kill in an instant, how orders got lost in the noise, and how boarding fights turned into bloody messes. Behind all that chaos, though, were real folks facing the constant shadow of death. This isn't just about tactics or weapons. It's about the heart of what these sailors went through, and this one letter shows that in a way stats and stories never could. Stick with me to feel the weight of it. Think about what life was like for these men at sea. Amid the flying wood shards, the failed signals and smoky battles, and the brutal close-up fights on enemy decks, sailors weren't just nameless figures. They were husbands, fathers, sons, regular people who knew every trip out might be their last. They weren't living for glory like the movies make you think. They were staring down death every single day, hoping to make it back to the ones they loved. That's the part of naval warfare we don't often picture, but it's the part that hits hardest when you stop to really see it. Now, imagine this one captain sitting in his cramped cabin the night before a big fight. He knew his odds weren't good. Battles back then weren't a game of skill half the time. They were a roll of the dice with your life on the line. So, he grabs a pen, some rough paper, and starts writing to his wife. He's pouring everything out, every thought and feeling, just in case he doesn't make it home. This isn't a report or a log for the Navy. It's personal, raw, and heavy, because he's got to say what matters most while he still has the chance. Think of it like typing out a goodbye text before heading into something dangerous. You know, that moment where every word feels huge, because it might be the last thing your family ever gets from you. That's what this captain faced, only with a scratchy quill and flickering candlelight instead of a phone. He's not thinking about medals or winning. He's thinking about the life he might not see again. The little things like his wife's smile or a quiet day at home. Each line he writes carries that weight, knowing she might read it without him there to explain. Historical letters from that time show this kind of quiet dread over and over. Sailors didn't fill their pages with tales of heroism or grand plans. Nope, they wrote about love, about the regret of being so far away, about simple hopes like seeing their kids grow up. These weren't speeches for history books. They were just real thoughts from real people, trying to leave something behind that mattered. It's not the stuff of epic films, but it's the stuff that makes you feel what they felt, even hundreds of years later. Picture him finishing up, folding that letter on deck as the crew loads cannons nearby. The air's already thick with tension, the smell of gunpowder sneaking in, and he's sealing this note with whatever he's got. Maybe a bit of wax, maybe just a tight fold. It's not just a piece of paper. It's a piece of him. Something he's leaving for his wife to hold on to if the worst happens. You can almost see his hands shaking a little, knowing the next few hours could decide everything. That's not a dramatic movie moment. That's just human, plain and simple. Research from battles like those in the War of 1812 turns up tons of accounts just like this. Officers, sailors, all kinds of men wrote final words before heading into the fight, never sure if they'd see another sunrise. These weren't just quick notes either. They often included practical stuff. How to split up their things, how to take care of the family left behind. That shows you how real the risk felt. They weren't dreaming of fame. They were trying to tie up loose ends from a rocking ship in the middle of nowhere. You wouldn't believe how much emotion fits into a few scratched-out lines. This captain's letter isn't just some old artifact to dust off. It's the heartbeat of what naval warfare cost people. The real winner here is the human connection. His words cut through all the numbers and casualty lists to remind us that behind every battle stat, there's a personal story of loss. Let's wrap this up with one last thought on why knowing these truths matters even today. Stick around for the final piece. So, naval warfare wasn't the clean, heroic tale Hollywood sells. It was splinters tearing through flesh, chaotic orders lost in smoke, and personal pain that cut deep, realities that shaped history and still echo now. What's your take on this brutal past? Drop a comment with your thoughts. If you want more raw history like this, hit that subscribe button for the next story. Let's end on this. Knowing the true cost of these battles doesn't just teach us history. It shows the strength and sacrifice behind every wave, reminding us what sailors endured out there.